What's up, amigos? Jaime here, and I'm super excited to have Nathaniel, also known as Sagran, to be a guest on the channel. And today we're doing a special kind of video. Do you want to quickly say hi in a few words, Nathaniel?
Yeah. Hey, guys. Again, this is Nathaniel, or on X, you know me as Nate/Judge Sagran on X a lot of the times. But yeah, I'm super glad to be part of this video.
Absolutely, man. And, you know, with this video, it's more of like judge rulings, judge experiences, going to a regional. There's sometimes misconceptions or even just like players don't know what to do when situations arise, essentially. And my goal really for this video is just having a discussion on common scenarios and also talk about like maybe some suggestions, and also like these are what you should do because of, you know, the comprehensive rules and things like that. It'll be a little bit of everything, essentially. And so with that, to highlight what Nathaniel is, he's a level 2 judge as well. And so he has the ability to head judge events as well. Do you want to mention any events that you may have head judge or shared on?
Yeah, of course. This most recent season for Springfest, my very first head judge event was the BCS in Duluth. Sorry, Springfest in Duluth. I said BCS. I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, I was super excited to head judge that. Plus, this coming season for BCS, I'll be head judging our Tampa and our Duluth events that are coming. I haven't got the confirmation on that just yet, but super hoping to be the head judge for that because I've already applied for those.
Right, exactly, too. And again, we want to thank and appreciate our judges too, because, you know, without the tournament organizers and the judges, like, we wouldn't have events as players too. So I wanted to just emphasize that in the very beginning too. We'll start diving into some of those categories too. The first one is basically, you know, what are some common issues that players can have occur, essentially? One of the biggest ones that I've seen is drawing an extra card by accident. Do you want to dive that a little bit deeper too, Nathaniel?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common scenario that happens because we're trying to rush through things. We're trying to get through our plays as fast as possible. Sometimes it accidentally happens, like you flip a card over or draw an extra card or something like that. But it's a really easy, quick fix. Yes, we do have to issue a warning for that type of scenario, but again, try not to make it a habit as they are looked at over the course of the entire tournament. But yeah, that is a pretty common occurrence. But my biggest thing is just slow down a little bit. You don't have to go so fast. Again, you get for this BCS season that's actually coming up, where you have a full 30 minutes for standard and 35 for premium for the Vanguard formats. So you have plenty of time to play the game. No, definitely. And I've seen it with like just the player's side of things. It's just sometimes the nerves get to you, and I understand that too. You know, whatever helps you with the nerves initially, that helps part of avoiding that too. But even like the preparation side of things could be like not forming that habit, right? And it's not like we're doing that on purpose, but it can just happen if we're not too careful in that sense too. Which kind of leads into my next point is that, you know, let's say some people are used to playing casually with their friends, or maybe even at locals, depending on how competitive or casual their locals is. And sometimes they can take back plays. Is there anything you want to shed on that with like a regional level? Yeah, so since we're coming up with the BCS season, we're at a level 2 event, specifically meaning we are at the highest level that you could possibly play, besides the world's format, of course. So because of that, we're really strict on these certain scenarios. Like if you make a play and you're like, no, I want to take that back, I really can't do that at this point. Once you commit to it, you got to commit to once you've committed the play, you have to resolve the play. I know a big thing is like, what if I called a certain rear guard here in this slot? I think that's one of the biggest ones. Like, oh no, my rear guard placement may not be as optimal now that I know this one situation. Well, you have to keep that in mind whenever we are playing at the BCS events. So I know one big thing that I know as myself, I've really opened up to my community about is we actually have like a BCS practice month for like at our locals and everything. So like for like a whole month, like we have like, I think it's in October, like October 12th, I believe, is 1 month before our BCS for Duluth. Like we have 4 events, and it's just it's a BCS. We're going to play it just like you would in BCS. Like once you make the play, you commit to the play. We have full 30 minutes on the clock, full 35 minutes on the clock. And if there are any rulings, like if there's a situation.
That is good practice, for real.
Yeah, and we've been doing it for quite some time, and it's really helped our community out. There's not really been an issue on our end, or at least not that I know from my friends. They're like, I should have done this or should have done that. It's like, no, I took that in mind. I made the commitment, and so I'm going to commit to that certain play. Yeah, absolutely. And to shed more on that from my own experiences too, whenever, you know, players are trying to improve, it's something that sometimes they try to think
with their hands.
Yeah.
And that's where the habit of like placing a card before they make that decision, or maybe that thought, is, you know, practice on thinking more in your head before you actually commit to the play.
Exactly.
You can even, you know, if you see like the top 5 and you're debating where to call, just let your opponent know, hey, I'm still debating where to call it. Let me check my hand. Because naturally we put a card down and then we look back at our hand, and so an opponent could think that you're placing it somewhere.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
just be transparent about it, so it makes that experience a lot more smoother too. And sometimes, you know, we've learned through our mistakes too. You know, when it hurts sometimes, it's like, dang, that's not as the optimal play, and now I have this useless booster or this, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But that happens one time and you learn from it too as well.
Exactly. That, I feel like experience is the best learner for that, for sure.
Absolutely.
Which is the reason I'm like, all right, let's experience it for 1 month before we actually have to implement it in real time for the BCS, for our BCS event.
Yeah, and another point to transition that happens common, I guess the question is like, when do I call a judge? And I know you and I have different stories that you want to encourage. Like, what's the first thing that, you know, that is common that people should call a judge, or at least be encouraged to do so?
Yeah. So anytime you do not feel like the game state is where it needs to be, like, or if you feel pressured by your opponent in any way, shape, form, or fashion, call the judge. It is your right as a player to call the judge in that situation, because we're here for a competitive environment. We're here for excuse me, we're here for a very, like, in terms of competitive environment, we're here for a smooth, exactly, a smooth gameplay. We want to make sure everything is as clean, I don't know if it's the best word for that, but like as correct a format as possible.
Yeah.
So because of that, people don't necessarily think there's a actual third option. We're here for a safe competitive format as well. I don't want to ever hear a player be like, I didn't feel comfortable like that, because it doesn't make me mad at the player. It makes me mad at the mindset that the player did not feel like they didn't have the right to do that, which makes me feel like, what could I have done better to help the player do that? Because for my events, I try to be as transparent and as open as possible. Like, hey, come talk to me, come get me, like, say judge, anything like that. You know? Yeah, like, exactly. I'm not a bad guy. I promise. I'm a really nice guy to get to know. I promise. But in terms of like what we do, I'm here to promote to my staff as judges, be like, hey, we are here to be as open and as competitive, but as safe as possible. And I feel like sometimes even our judges, like even my, like at times you may not think about that third one, but it's something that a lot of players may need to be reminded of. Like, hey, it's your right to do so.
Yeah. Sometimes it's because you're in the moment.
Exactly.
And sometimes players are already going through their emotional stability that they're trying to have while, like, crap, I made a mistake, or they made a mistake. Like, should we call judge? And I'm like, I don't know what to do in the situation.
Yeah.
You know, you start getting into this rabbit hole. That people can dive into. And it can be even the simplest things too. Like, it doesn't hurt to call a judge. Transition a little bit too. So these are stories sometimes that I hear from others that have experience too. I think the biggest horror story that I always hear is rule sharking. Essentially, an opponent notices a misplay, but doesn't say anything just yet. And the player just keeps going with their plays to the point where essentially it's like irreversible game state in most cases from what I hear. And that's when they bring it up. They call a judge, and however it pans out, basically the victim gets penalized by either a warning or maybe a game loss. I don't know to what extent. Is there, you know, suggestions that you may like to help prevent that, or how do you deal with that, or anything that you want to mention on that experience?
Yeah. So normally my level 1 or level 2 judges would, like myself, would probably be handling this situation specifically because this is a pretty big thing in terms of irreversible game state. Like, we talk about reversible game state, and we talk about irreversible game state. Normally, it does take a level 1 or level 2 to dive into this and be like, can we actually reverse this back?
Right. You make the effort to. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, first and foremost, I'm going to reverse as much as I can. I'm going to try my best to rewind the pieces, see what we can do to get it to where this can continue on.
Right.
Now, not every scenario can do that. Not every scenario we can get to that board state. For example, I know, I think it's the grade 1 Katrina V, I believe, is like the Neo Nectar one. Look at top 3, search for an Asha within the top 3, then put the cards on the bottom of the deck. It doesn't say shuffle, it just says put on the bottom of the deck. There's sometimes people shuffle the cards up and be like,
by habit.
Exactly, by habit. And I'm like that. Sometimes that's irreversible because I can't get an opponent confirmation. Well, what are the other 2 cards and stuff like that, because they're in the hidden zone. But we can go to the point where we can reverse it as far back as we possibly can, and then we can get confirmation with our opponents and be like, hey, I can issue a warning with this, and we continue on with the game. It has not changed to a degree.
Right.
So we have to keep each scenario in mind. So that's just one scenario that I came up with.
Right. This is not a one size fits all. I just want to make it clear with people too. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But there are certain situations where both you and your opponent have to keep that board state relevant, and not relevant, but keep it as consistent as possible. Okay. We don't need to have any misplays with that. So if your opponent sees that is gaining an advantage doing that, because they're pocketing basically a judge call at that point, which that does issue a warning for them at that point as well. We're here to keep both sides possible
on that.
Exactly.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
If the judge is or if the judge, because again, we know our fact finding questions. We know those hey, what's the scenario? And if my opponent's going oh yeah, they did this, and everything like that, and I'm like, so you knew about this a few moments ago, call the judge then. So again, there are ways for us to figure it out. We know how we can basically put
you can sniff them out.
We can put the pieces together and be like, all right,
gotcha.
This puzzle's missing a few pieces. What's going on? And so normally we can issue a warning out for both players. Again, both are different because again, both players need to be in control of the board state. So if you see your opponent doing something they're not supposed to do not try and gain an advantage out of that. You need to call the judge, and we need to make sure that we can fix it right then and there. Because again, it's not fun for anybody. It's not fun for the players. No, it's not fun for the judges. We don't like I don't like doing that. I will do that. But doesn't mean I have and like trying to fix an irreversible board state.
Right. You can only do so much from your position, I should say. Right. And as players, we just have to follow what it gets rolled at that point to the best of your ability, but also just the situation in current game state.
Correct.
Hilarious that you brought the shuffling. There's shuffling versus bottom decking, and I'm just thinking, I remember when I first picked up Gold Paladin. Yeah. That's a mess of all over the place too. So for something simple like that, definitely practice a lot. And if people catch you on that or something, they should be able to catch that at that moment. Not
they
wait
should be able to
3 turns or 3 plays or whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
That's a good example.
I feel like a good example is the Youth Burke one before we started having cards that just shuffle immediately afterwards, like bottom cards afterwards and everything like that. I know some players I shuffled. I'm like, okay.
Facepalm.
It's a facepalm moment at that point. I'm like, all right, let's try and fix it. So that's another big one, especially even my local scenario. Even myself, I picked up Youth Burke quite a while back, and I'm like, I have to get in the mindset of not shuffling. So I'm like, it's a big thing even for me.
I always sometimes take a second look at my Gold Paladin cards when I play people. I'm like, bottom deck, right? Okay, bottom deck. Okay, we're good on the same page. Anyway, awesome. Thank you for that. And then the next point, intentional slow play. So this is a scenario where people feel like your opponent may be stalling, and I've seen it come up where maybe they're debating to take a damage because there's going to be a multitude of attacks coming with certain power, certain crit. But if they're stalling damage per damage and they don't have enough guard, you can see some intentional slow play there. Maybe just people just taking forever on everything too, especially once they hear there's only a few minutes left in the round, and maybe they're trying to finish up their turn, but only give you 10 seconds on your turn or something. Yeah. There's variety when it comes to slow play. Anything you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I will go ahead and say a couple of things. Don't try to intentionally make your opponent lose by that way. The reason why I say that is because with our current rulings right now, it's a double loss, and you're only losing yourself at that point, because in one, you're robbing yourself of your opponent winning, which it's kind of a strange thing to say. Like, why would I want my opponent to win? Well, you have tiebreakers. Tiebreakers are huge because you want to make sure your opponent is a good opponent, because if you lose to only one person but they're undefeated all day long, it's still pretty good tiebreaker overall.
Yeah, they literally carry you into top cuts sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. So like, you don't want to try and rob people out of a double loss or double win at that point by intentionally slow playing. So don't do that. Second off, with the intentional slow playing, usually I give it maybe about a minute, maybe a minute and a half if I'm feeling generous. As this is me as a player, if I'm watching my opponent do something at that moment, if I see like, I usually will say to me like, hey, did you want to continue on, or were you still thinking about it? You don't want to like bully them into the situation, but you definitely want to maybe just ask a question just to see where their mindset's at, because they still may be thinking, they may have a legitimate thing. I know for me, is we've spoken at great lengths about this. We are both Grand Blue players.
Yes.
So a Grand Blue player, I've got lots of guard options. I have lots of rear guard interactions.
So many
and like,
lines of play.
Do I want to push the button on maybe like a Beatrice Cannoneer play, or like if I need to do something along like a Greed Shade, get cards back, or like, okay, where's the mindset? Well, I'm like,
do I need to Grenache on your turn?
Exactly. So like those are lines of plays I've got to think about and like lay it out in my head. And sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to look at them, but you need to tell your opponent, hey, I'm thinking about a certain line of play, and then things like that. So you want to keep that transparency between players. Now, as a judge, if I see that and I recognize that, hey, they're communicating with one another, I'm probably not going to look twice, look back and be like, hey, you need to, or like stand over them the whole time. The moment that once we get to that point of like, okay, they've told me about it, they're still taking forever to do it, I'm going to call a judge. Just to advise them. Because there's nothing wrong with being advised of a slow play. They're like, if you're not going to be scared about being DQ'd as a slow play or game loss as slow play. You might get a warning, maybe, depends. But normally, it's not going to be an immediate warning for a slow play. Usually, I'm going to do maybe a verbal caution, be like, hey, let's maybe pick it up. We've got so much time left around. I won't tell you how much time we've got left around, but again, you have so much time to play, and you want to make sure you can commit so much time to this play so you can continue on with the game. So at that point, maybe we're going to go with like a verbal caution, and then if it keeps going, then we're going to start issuing out warnings. I know that back in Springfest 2023, I know in a top cut, I was sitting right beside of the players, and one player, I'm like, hey, let's move on. We're talking about guarding, and you've been thinking about guarding for 2.5 minutes. So I'm like, and then it's just another.
That's a long time. Too,
exactly. And it was like right down to the wire. The game resolved perfectly fine, but it got to the point where we had to issue a warning out for this individual, and after the warning was issued out, again, I made sure to communicate that with because I wasn't level 2 then at that point, I was level 1. So I went to my level 2, I'm like, hey, this person's got this, just keep an eye out on it, because you're going to be watching over that game state, and I'm going to go to, I think it was premium, no, it was standard, and it was the V on the other side. So I was like, all right, I'm going to have to go over to V and do V duties now. So I went over there and did that. And so it was just, it's a lot of things that, again, like we said before, it's a case-by-case scenario. But again, as the player's right, it is your right to always call a judge if you ever feel like everything is not what it needs to be.
Yeah, and that's a good moment where like you can call a judge as soon as possible if you feel like it gets to that point. From a player perspective, I even encourage this with people. It's like, when you sit down with your opponent, have small talk. It opens the lines of communication. It helps bring down the walls, because most likely you don't know each other. Both of you want to win that round. So automatically there's sometimes walls there, invisible walls, and that hurts transparency, that hurts communication. So whenever those situations come about, and it's like, hey, I'm thinking because I cannot stride. So now I'm in this weird game state where I have to like play differently or try to make the best case I can. And you can be transparent with that, and your opponent can, in a way, give you some time or some leeway, or at least some like, okay, he's not stalling. He's actually thinking about something really serious or really impactful about this game too. So I love that you even mentioned it, like ask a question like, hey, are we moving on with this or something? Like you have your own way of approaching it too, but like communication is key. And then if it gets to it, then you call a judge, and then the judge can, you know, I guess time them, right?
Yeah, which we normally have stopwatches, so we're like
2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So again, there's levels of what you can do as a player, and also having a judge help out in that situation. So thank you for breaking that down.
You're welcome.
I'm going to switch gears to touchy topics a little bit too. So, and an opponent is suspected of cheating. What are the best ways to just approach it? And I think the most common are related to shuffling, but you can add to it if you want to.
Yeah, I feel like, again, cheating is not really a big thing, especially at the BCS. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm not saying that it's like 100% a fair game the entire time. Sometimes it happens, but as judges, it's our responsibility to try to like see that situation, but we have to be made aware of that situation.
Yes,
because despite me walking around the hall, the floor the entire time, despite the other judges walking around the entire time, we don't have eyes on the back of our head, and I'm not
hundreds of players.
Exactly, I'm not omnipresent, or like I'm not the all-seeing eye. I'm not like Sauron sitting on top of the tower.
So, exactly.
I'm not looking at all of them. But
the rank to collect them all.
Exactly, that's a wrong card game.
I know.
But as far as like us being made aware of it, we have to be made aware first and foremost.
Yeah.
So again, call the judge. Again, if you ever feel like, hey, this something doesn't feel right here, something is off, and if it's get to the point where it's like cheating, like a pretty serious case of cheating, I'm going to add an example. Like my opponent added a card from his drop to his hand on purpose, like pretty nefarious means of doing it, or something like that. Something like that. I'm just throwing a scenario out. Like if you notice that or something along those lines, you probably need to call a judge right away. And so now, while we necessarily may not be able to see right away or be able to rule in that exact moment, we have ways that, I mean, we can have judges assigned to certain areas of the tables and stuff like that, so we can make sure like, hey, we need to keep an eye on this board state, keep an eye on this game, and everything like that. And even if you were to win or lose that match, that judge call that you made doesn't necessarily just go away. It doesn't magically vanish whenever that game is over with. It carries on from round to round. So if we suspect something, we're going to follow up on it and from the next round. Now, so again, it may not be like, no, I was the one who lost to this individual, and then it was later found out that may have been cheating or something like that. And that, to me, that's a terrible feeling. I don't like feeling like that. And I know nobody else feels like feeling like that. But sometimes that happens because it's the nature of a game. It's the nature of a competitive format. It's the human nature of trying to gain an advantage. And to me, we should be better people than that.
Obviously.
But there are some people who aren't.
Yeah.
So it's our responsibility to ensure that does not go unpunished.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, we have to make sure we watch out for that. But again, we have to be made aware of it first.
Yeah, and that's a good point that it carries, because like it may not like EQ them or games them immediately, but now they have something that's following them to the later rounds, which game's like, okay, this is not by accident. This is actually like a trend, or you have data that you're collecting essentially about this player to make a better educated decision for you as judges too, which I think helps just overall moving forward at that point too. To share a little bit of my experience too, even years ago, we're talking about even before COVID days, in the later rounds of Swiss, I was made aware that the opponent that I was going to later on face on was suspected of cheating because of weird shuffling methods. And I had friends mention that to me because some of them had to face them throughout the rounds prior, and they've noticed some weird shuffling, but also like they had to go back to their deck to search for cards or superior call cards, whatever. And they could just notice like things at the bottom of the deck that were like heal triggers, perfect guards, things that like were like, seems a little bit, trying to connect the dots. And essentially they're giving me a heads up, just watch out. Yeah. And it's that day that I learned that I can have a judge do a judge cut.
Correct.
And so whenever it got to the point where which it did get to a point where he shuffled weirdly than he was prior when we're already playing, that's when I'm like, okay, I shuffled, then he shuffled weirdly, judge cut, please.
Yeah.
And at that point, the judge did the riffle shuffle and everything that they did, and boom,
Yeah.
And it's nothing to be calling out people, but it's just like, hey, can you do this for me just in case? Just so make sure that this is a smooth game, and that's the goal essentially too. I think you wanted to say something on that, or
yeah, which also, like, if your opponent should always present the opportunity to cut or shuffle the deck as well. I know that at certain, like, if I ever decide to be like, oh, I'm going to compete for something big, like off to another side event for Vanguard, or if I were to compete for Springfest or BCS, or even the BRO, whenever I participated in BRO this past November, like, you have to, like, for the shuffling, I will always shuffle my opponent's deck. Like, I don't care if I know you, I don't care if I don't know you. Like, I'm shuffling the deck. It makes me feel better for that reason.
Yeah, for yourself.
And then then the player can do the cut for themselves at that point, because I did a shuffle for them. So that's always something that players can also be made aware of. Like, hey, you have the opportunity to shuffle your opponent's deck. You can cut their opponent's deck. You can get a judge to cut the opponent's deck and / shuffle the deck. Any way that makes both players feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, basically at peace, and you're able just to focus on the game and, play the best of your ability. That's what it's all about, really, playing the best you can. Awesome. Thank you. I think that was really good to slow down a little bit too for that one. And so the next one, I think we hear this common complaint with Swiss rounds, the double loss rule. And I think there's topics of where, like, it just sucks when both players just lose. Is there anything you want to shed on that too?
Yeah, I know a lot of people. There's been lots of criticisms on the double loss. Me as a judge, I do like this ruling. It does shorten our tournament. Exactly. So now hold up, hear me out. I can hear the fingers typing in the comments below, like, whoa, wait, hear me out. It shortens our tournament time. So we're not adding an extra 10 minutes and 10 minutes and 10 minutes and 10 minutes, and after 8 rounds, if we did that for full 8 rounds for 10 minutes every single round, it's over an hour and a half. Like, it's almost at an hour and a half, just about it, because then you have to go process those results afterwards. So we're adding more time at the end of those 10 minutes. Yeah. So it's going to take time. Yeah. As a judge, my time, I'm working that entire time. So I'm running around. I'm trying to fix all these things. I'm trying to rule on these things. We're trying to maintain the tournament and everything like that. And because of that, if you shorten my work time by an hour and a half, I'm going to be very appreciative of that.
Right. So there are points where you guys are running like chickens without your heads sometimes.
Exactly.
That's an expression.
So as a judge, I want to preface that in quotation marks. As a judge, I like this ruling. Right. As a player, I definitely understand, and it would make me very upset. Yeah, I understand that. So again, that's the reason why, again, like we stated before, like that month practice. Practice your month. Practice different decks. Like, don't even even with your deck that you're practicing. Sometimes, like, even myself, since I won't be playing in BCS, I'll just bring a different deck that people may not know how to play against or anything like that. I'm like, I'm going to try and test you. I'm going to mess with your time during the entire time. So I'm like, just trying to differentiate yourself. Be like, oh, okay, I've never played against this deck. How do I win against this deck? And stuff like that. So that's one thing in that regards. But as the double loss as a player, whenever you hear that, it sucks. I understand. But as a judge, one, I appreciate that ruling, but I also have to enforce that ruling. So whenever we are enforcing that ruling, I definitely understand your criticisms. I understand sometimes some selected 4-letter words may even come out during that time. But again, it's not something that I'm doing to you on purpose in terms of like, oh, you did this on purpose, so you deserve the double. No, I'm just enforcing rules. That's all I'm doing.
You literally, as a person, did not make that rule up.
Exactly. That's
some people just, I guess, imagine that. I don't know, but Bushiroad does this. It's on the website. It's presented to you months in advance. So when you're at the regional, it's your responsibility as a player to at least get informed.
Exactly.
To the best of your ability, right?
Yeah. So, and I will advise, like, when you are taking the double loss, if you're looking at it, if for some reason a player wanted to say like, hey, give them the win or anything like that, that's fine in that regards. But I, as a judge, I'm not going to encourage you to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
My process is I'm going to walk up to your table. I'm going to say, did time get called? Yes. Okay. You have 5 seconds to make a decision. It's been 5 seconds. All right, double loss for both players. Like that's my process going through that entire time. I know that there are certain times, especially at this past Duluth, whenever I was head judge, first round, literally the first round, it was a double loss at a couple tables, and I went to the table and they're like, but this board state says this board state says that, and I'll have an extra turn. Nope, I don't care. I don't care what that board state says. I don't care what your next turn says. I don't care what your hand looks like. What it is, a double loss, plain and simple. We are moving on. Like at that point, like I feel like players are like, but if I had extra few minutes, and I understand if you had an extra few minutes, we wouldn't even be here at this point. But we are here at this point, so we have to make the decision.
Yeah, and I think that stems from also prior experiences with different TCGs or even different roles with Vanguard, where you can play out like your 0, 1, 2, 3 turns or 10 minutes and highest damage and all that stuff. But like, at least with the Swiss rounds currently, the double loss is in effect, and people, unfortunately, it's happened to everybody at this point. It's happened to me before too as well. It sucks. Again, tiebreakers too, you know?
Tiebreakers.
You know, I don't care if I win or lose, but as long as like one of us, you know, can help carry the other person into top cut, you know, then we can figure that out later on top cut, who ends up, you know, placing and stuff like that.
Exactly. I know that like as a player, I have not been affected by the double time in terms of me as a player. And that's since the beginning of once we introduced this rule. Well, no, sorry, not we, when Bushiroad introduced this rule back in the Springfest format. So for me, it's not really been an issue, but the reason why it's not an issue for me is because I practiced my deck. Like we were saying before, take the time to practice. Know your matchups, know what you need to do, know different scenarios. Like you can just goldfish out scenarios and be like, okay, this looks like, and this looks like here. Even me here sitting at this desk right now, like, and again, this is a proxy Night Rose standard list, just so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna goldfish, or when I've got like a break or something, be like, all right, I'm gonna take a look at these plays. I'm gonna see what we need to do so I can make it as fast and optimal as possible.
Absolutely.
I feel like that's
muscle
also
memory.
Exactly. Like with Gize, I'm a big fan as well.
Okay.
But also I play weird Gize decks. Like one of my pet projects has been Sienna Gize, because I like defensive plays. I'm be like, all right, I want to bind that unit. I want to bind this unit. Don't touch me. Stuff like that. And it also turns all your draw triggers into 15k shields at that point. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That aside,
right.
I've take time to learn to learn my defensive plays. Because basically what my opponent's doing, I don't care what my opponent's doing when I'm playing Gize. I know I need to focus on what I'm doing and how I can get from point A to point B as fast as possible. So because of that, I'm just going through the motions. I'm like, all right, what do I see here? It saves you so much time. Exactly.
And stamina, mental.
Exactly. Like that's another thing in the BCS, like, or even Springfest, just the competitive fatigue. That's what I call it, competitive fatigue. It's a very real thing.
Absolutely.
It will affect even the best players, even like Worlds players. They've come up to me and be like, man, I was done by like round 3. And I was like, round 3? You had 8 rounds to go. What are you talking about? Like, no, you don't understand. It was rough. And I was like, I mean, I'm sure it was. I mean, I wasn't there. I'm not a Worlds player, so I don't understand that. But competitive fatigue can really eat into that. But that's the reason why you have to take away as much differentiating factors, like my opponent, take that factor away. Fatigue, try to take that factor away. Muscle memory, try to take that factor away. I'm focusing on what I need to do. And I feel like, I'm not saying that not all players do that. I'm sure there's plenty of players that do that. But it is something that I feel like every player should do. If you're coming to the BCS, this is the time to play. This is the time, again, like we talked about earlier, it's a level 2 event. You're competing for a Worlds invite. In first place, and also not just Worlds invite. That the prize support that's on there this year, I love the prize support. That's for top cut, for 4th place and up, and for first place you get an all expense paid trip to Worlds. That's a lot of money. I'm just saying, if I was a player, I would be sitting in the seat. I'm like, it's go time. I'm going to. I'm locking in. That's what the young kids say. I'm locking in right now.
No, that's very good that you explained that too, because like it's so crucial with everything that factors into it. And you know, I'm glad that even you as a judge see like mental stamina and also like the efficiency of muscle memory and things like that. Just makes that experience so much smoother too. I think the last touchy point that I want to hit is like, you know, there's sometimes players have negative experiences in the event, but for whatever reason, maybe they don't feel comfortable enough to bring it into a judge or a two. And sometimes that can go into like after the event, maybe they talk to their friends and they get frustrated and their friends are like, yeah, that guy screwed you over. Or like they bring it to social media, which is probably not the best thing to do. And it could blow up. Everybody has a say on social media too, on top of that. You know, what would you recommend players if they experience something negative at the moment? What should they really do?
So there's a couple of things. There's in the moment, and then there's after the event.
Okay.
Let's talk about in the moment first. So in the moment, get a judge immediately, even if it was during that round or after that round. If you're like, man, I just need to talk to somebody about it. Like, and I understand your best friends and everything. You may want to talk to them first about it. Trust me, I've been there, done that. Talk to your best friends about it, but then talk to your judge about it. Talk to any judge about it. And then if it's to the point where, hey, we actually do need to like escalate that, they'll come to a head judge about it, or even the TO. They'll go to the TO about it, and then the TO is going to talk to the head judge and be like, hey, let's open up, let's communicate to one another and seeing what's going on. So we got to be made aware of it. If we're not made aware of it, we don't know. And then you see it on social media. Like if I was a head judge at an event and that kind of thing happened, I have not been a head judge and that kind of thing happened. But if it did and I saw that situation occur on there, I'd feel terrible, because I'm like, well, how did that slip by? How did that get away from me or anything like that? But again, part of that is, I wasn't told that ahead of time. I wasn't told by the player. So again, it's a player's right to always talk to a judge, talk to the head judge, talk to the TO at all times. There's no gate separating us from there and be like, nope, you can't do that. No, you always have that right to do so. And it's as simple as walking into HQ, raising your hand, or even if you see someone walking around, just like go up and talk to them, just casually, just
even in passing. Yeah,
exactly, even in passing. So that's in the moment. If you see that in the moment, we have to be made aware of it. After an event, there is an email on Bushiroad's website. I believe it's. I'm not going to say it off the top of my head. I could probably
put it in the description.
Yeah, just put in the description down below. Yeah, but that email there, it is the email that they use for communications in terms of event reports. So if they get any type of event feedback, like, hey, this event was awesome, or anything like that, or if there was
you can say nice things to them too.
You can. Appreciate it if you say nice things to Bushiroad, because that means people like that event. They'll still keep going to there. I would really appreciate it if you still have events in Duluth. But so any type of complaint, any type of compliment, that can be sent to Bushiroad, and they are made aware of it. And then in turn, we are made aware of it in the future. For again, it's not just from event. It's not like one station event where nothing happens. Events carry over from one another to one another. So if we have I'm just going to give you an example. Like if player A was suspected of cheating or anything like that, but it was made after the event, but they show up to the next event, Bushiroad's going to be like, just keep an eye out. I'm not saying anything, but keep an eye out on it. So so we have to be made aware, and once we're made aware of it, we can develop a game plan for that.
No, that's good to hear, because like sometimes I think people do feel like it's too late at that point.
Yeah.
But if that player is consistently going from event to event, and there's some kind of like, I guess, watchful eyes, or like you start collecting data on the player too. So again, you guys are trying to make the best educated decision that you can for each player or situation that comes about in that situation. And so you actually answered one of my next topics, and to end with like, what are the best ways to communicate with Bushiroad? And that's really just emailing them too. Yeah. In that reason. So I would just agree that, if something happens in the moment, just talk to a judge, TO, whoever. It's better to make it aware, I guess, is the key thing, right?
It is the best way to make us aware of the situation. I keep saying us, it's Bushiroad. Make Bushiroad aware of the situation. Now, there are times like you just said a few moments ago, they're probably going to go to social media and talk about it and everything like that. I can't stop you there. I'm not going to try and stop you there.
Right.
But I will take that as a learning experience. I know back a few months back in our Springfest Duluth, there was a situation that arose where we had to look where some comments were made about some of the judge staffing, and then I took it upon myself, since I'm the head judge. That's my staff. I'm the one who looks over that staff, and I trust that staff. So if there's something, then I'm like, maybe I need to be made aware of something. I'm going to take that upon myself to learn about that situation and see if it maybe affects the future, if it doesn't affect the future, if it's just people talking on Facebook or X or wherever you make your social media rants at. That's probably where I'm going to be looking at. But it was determined by me that there nothing to really look into, and it was just upset players, which it's fine. Sometimes people do that, and I understand that. I mean, if you look on my X feed, sometimes I make some rants on there too. So like I am not subject. I'm not what's the word I'm looking for? Not exempt from making rants about things about certain
You're
things.
a human being.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what we do. We make like we're human beings and stuff like that. But the best and effective way to do it, just email Bushiroad. It's the best way to do it.
Yeah. And, you know, when it comes to like even like Twitter or Facebook, I know like I know you personally, so I could always like ask a question to you. Would you encourage people reaching out to a few judges on social media at all? Or
yeah, I know that there are certain judges. This is not a plug or anything, but I know Kairos he does a lot of translations. Like every single card of the day that comes out, he's on it.
Yeah,
he's doing the translations, and he even has in his like on his bio, like if you have a ruling question, just IM me on here, like on X, and he'll get back to you as soon as possible. And while that may not necessarily be on my bio as well on X, probably should put it on my bio. It wouldn't hurt to put it on there. But if you ever have anything to message me about, you can go ahead and send me a message on there on X, or if you know me on Facebook, send me a message on Facebook. I get people all the time asking me questions on Facebook, so it's not a rare occurrence that happens to me. It's expected. So I'm like, I've put this out there, and since I've put that out there, I'm going to own up to it. I'm going to try my best to respond to as many people as I can.
And so I appreciate you guys for even doing that too.
Yeah,
because I know it can be a lot, and sometimes it may not be the most convenient in your day to day as well.
Yeah, and sometimes I may not get to it right away. But just because I don't get to it right away, don't be like he sucks. That judge sucks. I'm like I'm human. I work at a 40-hour work week, so I'm like I've got a life, and I got a life outside of Vanguard. Weird concept.
I know, right?
Sure. but there are things like life gets in the way, but I promise I will get to, or I may even be spending time being like consulting with other judges, because sometimes I get asked wild things.
Fair enough.
I'm like, man, I really need a second opinion on this, because even though I'm a level 2 judge, I don't know it all. I don't know every single little thing in there. Exactly. Everything is impossible to know, because, I mean, a little bit of background history. I took time off from Vanguard during a lot of the V era. So there are some V cards I'm just like,
this thing exists.
I have to this card now because I don't know this in my memory. So I have to read it. So like I'll always have my phone on me and be like, all right, what's this card do?
Yeah.
So I'll be reading. I have to be researching cards and be like, what's this interaction? And sometimes I even have to like lay cards out and be like I've put a card here, and be like, all right, this is how this affects this. Put the card there. That's what affects this here. Okay, I think I have the ruling, or anything like that. So sometimes I'm a visual learner in some like certain aspects, especially with the game. So like it just takes time. If I don't respond back, just give me a minute.
Right. And for players, whenever you're emailing or messaging people about like these types of rulings, make an effort to make it easier for them, like supply pictures or like describe interactions, and even suggest like, hey, I think this is how it works out because of X, Y, and Z. I think that helps the judge kind of like narrow down on what the interaction is, and also just streamline the process for them as well. So
exactly.
I will add more of the other notes that we had that we really didn't have time to cover into like a comment or the description. So be on the lookout for that for those viewing too. And lastly, I just want to thank Nathaniel again, and also appreciate the judges with Bushiroad too. Just again, without them, we would not have events. We would not have a BCS. We would not have a Worlds. We would not have all the fun that we can have with our friends and just enjoy the journey as well as players too. So thank you again. Anything you want to say before we hop off?
No, I really appreciate this community. Again, having this outlet is really helpful, because again, my only outlet's like X. And so, but again, having a voice heard and stuff like that. So I really appreciate even you giving me the opportunity to do this. If you do want to hear more of my talking and rambling and even non-Vanguard related stuff, I'm sure we can put in the description down below. We'll have my X file there.
Yeah, definitely. We'll plug you in for sure. So thank you again. And until the next time, amigos. See ya.